everyone, I'm Nizzahon, and today I'm bringing you another video on Dominaria Limited. If you've been following my channel this week, you know I've reviewed every single card in this set. I've talked about the archetypes in this set, and this video is sort of a quick way to get the key points, I guess, in those videos. If you don't have time to watch, the hours of videos about every single card, this video is a better place to go for your pre-release prep if you don't have a ton of time, because I'm just going to talk about the best commons and the uncommons in the set in each color and in artifacts, because there's enough artifacts in the set for that to matter. Still, if you want to see videos on every single card in the set and other videos about Dominaria Limited that are much longer, you can find them in the description below. First, let's start by looking at white uncommons. I think the third best white uncommon is Baird, Steward of Argive. He's got great stats. Great's an exaggeration, but he's got solid stats for a 4-mana creature, and his ability is a real problem. It forces your opponent to have to choose whether or not they want to continue to develop their board or be able to attack you. And no matter what, even if you're playing a more aggressive deck and they're an aggressive deck, it's going to be a problem for them. It helps you win the race because your opponent just won't be able to attack as easily with their army full of creatures as you'll be able to. So he's great. He's first pickable. All three white uncommons I think are first pickable, and I have them in order of how good I think each is, because I think Baird is only the third best. The second best one I think is Sarah Angel. We've seen it at uncommon a lot of times. It's great. Just think about, if you've never had a chance to play with Sarah Angel, think about Air Elemental and then realize that Sarah Angel is even better than Air Elemental. So there you go. Sarah Angel, also first pickable. And I think the number one card in white, as an uncommon anyway, is Seal Away. It is a little bit situational, but, exiling tapped creatures is pretty powerful at 2 mana. You're almost always going to trade up. It exiles. There's a few creatures in this format that don't care if they die because they can come back, but Seal Away deals with them. And that's really great. It is, I think, the best removal spell in white. We're going to see a few more when we look at the best white commons. And I think it's the one you want to first pick the most out of these three cards, although you're pretty happy if you see any of these in your pack. Next, we'll look at the white commons. In terms of commons, normally I only do 3, but I had a hard time narrowing white down to only 3 commons, so we have more than that. First, I think Pegasus Courser is the 4th best white common. And the white commons are all so good and so close in power level, I wouldn't be surprised to see them shuffle around. So Pegasus Courser is great because it is a flying threat. Well, threat's a strong word, but it can make your creatures into real threats by making other creatures fly when it attacks. Blessed Light is nice because it's capable of killing things at instant speed. It is a little expensive at 5 mana, and I think that keeps me from wanting to call it premium removal. But it does deal with creatures, no questions asked, and even enchantments when that matters. So it's a very good card. I think the top 3 on this list are all 3 cards I'd feel okay about first picking, which kind of means to me Pegasus Courser probably is a firm number 4, but Blessed Light would be an okay first pick. Not one you're overjoyed about, but it's fine. Call the Cavalry, I think, is actually better. I know it's not removal, but think about it. Would you play 4 Call the Cavalries? Yes. Would you play 4 Blessed Lights? Nope. No, you really wouldn't. They're just too expensive. You'd play like 2 Blessed Lights and be happy about it. 4 is a lot. Sometimes maybe you want to. Maybe this format will be slow enough having 4 Blessed Lights is good, but I think I like to call the Cavalry more. It fits into a lot of different things in this format too. There's a go wide deck in green-white that it's really good with, and it's just good in any white deck anyway. And the number 1 white common, I think, is Gideon's Reproach. It's another situational removal spell, and it costs only 2 mana, but it is situational, but it's not that situational. It deals with attacking or blocking creatures. Now, it does have to have toughness 4 or less, and that is a relevant thing for, Gideon's Reproach to really matter. But either way, it's a good removal spell. You're always going to trade up with it, too. And so I think those are the best white commons. I think the top 3 are sort of a cut above the Courser, but I did want to get the Courser in here because I think it's a pretty good card. Next, let's look at the best blue uncommons. So I think the third best blue uncommon is Merfolk Trickster. I mean, a 2-mana 2/2 with Flash is already kind of a good card, and this one also, when it enters the battlefield, taps stuff and makes them lose abilities. You can use that in so many different ways. You can use it to turn off an annoying static ability on one of your opponent's creatures, like a Lord ability. You can use it to tap down a blocker. You can use it to tap down a creature before your opponent attacks. You can use it for a lot of different things. It's a 2-drop that's good at every stage of the game, and there aren't a lot of those running around, but it is one of them. Also a wizard for the blue-red deck, if that matters. Time of Ice is the second best blue uncommon, I think. Now, I will give you the caveat that I think these sagas are difficult to judge because it's not something we've really ever seen before. But I like this one. It taps stuff down until it's gone, so you're going to have 2 creatures tapped down by the time you get to Chapter 3, and Chapter 3 bounces all tapped creatures. So at a minimum, you're probably bouncing 2 creatures with it, and it also makes it so your opponent can't really attack you. And because of when the when the Saga gets the lore counter at Chapter 3, which is after your draw step, which is after your untap step, it's not going to bounce any of your creatures. So you can look at this as like a 4 mana card. 4 mana to tap something down and not let it untap is not a good deal. But by the time you get to do the second one, and certainly by the time you bounce their tapped creatures, you're getting your mana's worth out of this thing. And I like it a lot. I think it's first pickable. I think Merfolk Trickster is close to being first pickable, but not one you're overjoyed about. I think Time of Ice is one you feel pretty good about. It's definitely better if you're an aggro deck too, because it can really just out-tempo your opponent because you're just returning all their big blockers and stuff like that while you get to continue to attack them. The number 1 blue uncommon, I think, is just the best uncommon in the entire set. We'll see how it pans out, and that is in Bolas's Clutches. The big leak came out early, and this was one of them. I just assumed it was going to be rare. Nope, it's uncommon. Mind control effects are incredibly powerful. You get to steal an opponent's creature, which is effectively a 2-for-1, because your opponent goes from having... Your opponent loses 1 creature and you gain 1 creature, is one way to look at it. And you can also steal planeswalkers or any other permanent with this thing, and that is certainly relevant. In Bolas's Clutches is a snap first pick. I even think it's better than most of the rares in this format. In my list of top 10 bombs in the format, it's actually going to make the list despite being an uncommon. I just think it's that powerful. So, yeah, in Bolas's Clutches is one of the best things you can start a draft with, period. Not just uncommon or common, just period. So keep that in mind. Next, we have blue commons. I think the number 3 blue common is Deep Freeze. It's another removal spell that is perfectly solid, but it is certainly not a premium removal spell. Sure, it shuts down your opponent's best creature and turns it into a 0/4 wall, but it's going to be annoying sometimes that your opponent actually has a relevant body to block with in a lot of cases. Now, if your deck is a Skies deck, this does sort of move up, because if your deck is like, mostly flyers, you don't really care about the creature on the ground. It also combos with Juggernaut, which is in this set, so, the wall won't be able to block Juggernaut, so there's some little things like that going on. And it's a fine card, but I don't think it's one you really want to first pick. I don't think it's one you want more than a couple of in your deck, just because it's just not quality removal. Or premium removal even. It's just fine. And, it's a solid blue common, but it's not one you really want to start your draft with. Blink of an Eye, though, I think is a better common. I think it's one you don't mind first picking too much. It's great that it can just be dispersed early, which is, just return a permanent, non-land permanent to instant speed. And then late, it also can draw you a card for not that much more of an investment, and that's going to feel great. And I think the best blue common is Academy Journey Mage, which obviously, I think of these 3, I'd feel the happiest about first picking. It's a mana war, it can bounce a creature. It is better in a wizard deck, but you don't even need a wizard deck for it to be good. If you can play it for 4 mana, it does get better than 5, obviously. But playing this thing for 5 isn't something I'm going to feel bad about, really, either. It's a really good spell. So those are the 3 best blue commons. Now let's move to black and look at black's uncommons. I think the 3rd best black uncommon is Knight of Malice. You'll notice the white knight didn't make the list. I do think it's really good, but I think white had 3 uncommons that are better, and that may tell you that black is a little more shallow at uncommon. But, Knight of Malice is good. It's a 2-mana 2/2 with first strike. That'll sometimes be a 3/2. If you're actually playing a black-white deck, it'll even more frequently be a 3/2 because it counts your permanents as well. And it has hexproof from white, so it's immune to some removal spells and activated abilities. The 2nd best black uncommon is Settle the Score. It's a removal spell. It exiles something, no questions asked. So it's already a strictly better Impale, basically, right? On top of that, it also gives you 2 loyalty counters on a planeswalker you control. That's almost never going to be relevant, just to say it, but hey, it is additional upside. Mostly it's just a kill spell that can kill anything, no questions asked. And I think the best black uncommon is Cast Down. It does only destroy non-legendary creatures, and I think a lot of people, based on comments I've seen in my videos, are thinking there's going to be so many legendary creatures in this format that a card like Cast Down isn't going to be good. And while that it is tempered by that fact, but that's kind of why they printed it. Legendary creatures are only at uncommon or higher, so it's not that easy to get like 10 legendary creatures. People will manage it sometimes, and that'll make your Cast Down suck, but most people are going to have like 3 to 5 or something like that because they're uncommon or higher. They're not that easy to get your hands on. They're all over, but they're at a higher rarity than you expect. And a good comparison is to say, you know, Go for the Throat was good in Mirrored and Besieged despite there being artifact creatures, or Doomblade is good in literally any format despite the fact that there are black creatures. Sure, some things you can't target, but that's the price you're paying for this incredibly efficient removal spell. I guess a more recent example would actually be Walk the Plank. People were playing Merfolk, and it was still a good card. Next, we move to the black commons. I think the third best black common is Deathbloom Thallid. A 3-mana 3/2 who leaves a Saproling behind is just great. You know, solid stats to begin with, and it makes sure that it leaves something behind, even if it just gets killed. Vicious Offering is a very efficient removal spell. I would feel good about first picking it. I wouldn't about Deathbloom Thallid, by the way. I would feel good about first picking Vicious Offering, though. It's either, you know, -2/-2 or -5/-5. It gets more potent in a deck with cards like Deathbloom Thallid because you can sacrifice it and still have a Saproling, or use the Saproling it's already left behind. And the number one black common is Eviscerate, which for 4 mana destroys a creature. Now, an interesting thing here is Eviscerate actually better than the second best black uncommon, which was Settle the Score? And I think it is better to first pick. I don't think it is better because it doesn't exile the creature, but the nice thing about Eviscerate is it's splashable, right? So first picking it is a little safer than first picking Settle the Score. And Settle the Score isn't so much better than Eviscerate that it's like a huge deal to take Eviscerate over it. But Eviscerate's great. Both Eviscerate and Vicious Offering are things I'd first pick. Obviously, black is loaded with removal. It has two premium removal spells at black, and at common rather, and 2 at uncommon. So that's a pretty good deal. Now let's look at red's uncommons. I think the third best red uncommon is Goblin Barrage. For 4 mana, it does 4 to something at sorcery speed, which is fine, but the additional value you get out of the potential kicker, where you can sack an artifact or a goblin, don't have to pay extra mana like most of them, is nice. You basically get to Lava Axe, or 4/5 of a Lava Axe your opponent in the face in addition to killing their creature, and sometimes that'll make a massive difference. Wizard's Lightning, I have it number 2. I thought this would be number 1. But the more I've looked at this set, I've decided that it's number 2. Now, if your deck has like 10 wizards in it, it's probably better than the number 1 uncommon we're about to look at. But I think, when you're in a pack 1, pick 1 scenario, you're going to take the next card I show you over this one. But it is incredibly good. It's very good. I like Wizard's Lightning a lot. If it turns into Lightning Bolt, it's even better. It's either Open Fire or Lightning Bolt, and both of those cards have been great historically in Limited. And I think the number 1 red uncommon is Fight with Fire. Now, it's not instant speed, but for 3 mana, it does 5 damage to something, which is a great rate. And in the late game, if you happen to have 10 mana laying around, it just domes your opponent, or, you can kill their creatures too. But doing 10 to your opponent is often going to be enough to kill them if you have 10 mana. And so it turns into a win condition, basically, after being an efficient removal spell the whole rest of the game. So that's a pretty great deal to have. I could definitely see Wizard's Lightning being better than Fight with Fire, but right now I think I would take Fight with Fire over Wizard's Lightning in a pack 1, pick 1 scenario. Now let's look at the commons in red. I think the third best red common is Keldon Raider, a 4 mana 4/3 that lets you rummage. You can see, the red commons aren't nearly as high of a power level as the red uncommons, mostly. I don't really want to first pick Keldon Raider ever. It's a card that I'll play like 2 or 3 of in a red deck, though, and feel fine. What's nice about it is it provides decent stats, and it does something relevant at all stages of the game. If you're holding onto a land, which you should be doing if you're running Keldon Raider, and, you don't need more lands, you need to draw more spells, you can play Keldon Raider, discard that land, and draw a card, and that's a nice bit of additional value. Second best, I think, is Fiery Intervention. It's certainly not premium removal. We've already saw that red has a bunch of that at uncommon, but Fiery Intervention is not part of that. It is clunky, but it does have nice flexibility. There's lots of artifacts in the set, and doing 5 to something for 5 isn't bad. Don't really want to first pick Fiery Intervention, though, either. I think the best red common is first pickable, though, and that is Sheevan Fire. For 1 red mana, it can do 2 to a creature. If it's kicked, it can do 4. And that's pretty great. It's another card that scales as the game goes on. It kills smaller things early, bigger things late. It's a first pickable common for sure. I'd be really happy to have as many of these as I can shove into my deck. And so it's a great card. Now let's move to green. I think the third best green uncommon is Elfhame Druid. It's a nice little mana dork, and it gets even better with kicked spells. Green has a lot of kick spells. Red-green has even more. That's the color pair with the most kicker. So that's probably where it'll be at its best, but it'll be good in any deck because it can, ramp you. And it's also, the 2 toughness is relevant. There are soldier tokens and sapling tokens running around in this format, and it can block those. And that certainly doesn't hurt its value. Spore Swarm is also very good. 4 mana to make 3 sapling tokens at instant speed. That can generate card advantage because of the 3 bodies you're getting. There's also some extra synergies with saplings, especially in black-green. And in green-white, there are more payoffs for going really wide, so it's good there. But it's good in any green deck, to be fair. It's just a very good card. I would be happy first picking Spore Swarm. I think I'd be less happy picking Elfame Druid, but I can definitely see packs where that's the right decision. And number 1 is Untamed Kavu, which is just a jacked-up Kavu Titan, an old card with kicker from Invasion. It's a 2 mana 2/2 with Vigilance and Trample in the early game, which is a pretty good deal. I mean, obviously Trample doesn't make a big difference on a 2/2, but Vigilance doesn't hurt. But if you kick it, it becomes a 5/5. So it can be a card that helps you curve out early, or it can be your top curve that can win you the game with its large body and 2 keyword abilities. Of these 3, obviously it's the one I think you should first pick the most happily, but Spore Swarm's not super far behind, and Elfame Druid isn't too far behind Spore Swarm either. Now let's look at green common. So I mentioned in white I had a hard time narrowing it down to 3. In green, I had an even harder time, and I'm going to show you what I think are the 5 best green commons, because I could see them all sort of moving around. There's a lot that are good and have decent power levels, so it was hard to figure out which 3 I wanted to talk about. So we're just going to talk about 5. I think the 5th best green common, at least at this point, is Sapperling Migration. Krenko's Command and Goblin Fodder and things like that. 2 mana spells that make 2 1/1 tokens have always been good, and this one in the later game scales because in the late game you can make 4 tokens with it if you kick it, and that's just really good. Yavimaya Sap Herd, I mean, we've seen a card like this so many times in the past. 3 mana 2/2 that makes a 1/1. It's always one of green's best commons, and this is yet another one of those. It's a card you probably don't want to first pick, but in a weaker pack I could see doing it. I don't think Sapperling Migration I want to first pick at this point. Next we have Ancient Animus. This card is basically green's only removal spell, and it's also green's only card that cares about legendary stuff, which is sort of weird. It's not great. Mostly it's just Pounce, which was a solid but unspectacular card in Ixalan. And you occasionally will have a legendary creature, and when you do, and when you can do the +1/+1 counter thing, it's an incredibly efficient removal spell. But it's not going to be that easy to have one in play when you want to cast Ancient Animus. So again, if you do, that's going to be great. I could almost see, now that I'm sort of looking at how I have this, I could almost see taking Yavimaya Sapherd over Ancient Animus, just because Ancient Animus is nowhere near a premium removal spell. It's just an okay one. The second best green common, and I think I have 2 and 1 pretty much. I don't see those 2 changing, but the bottom 3 could move around. Number 2, I have Baloth Gorger. It's another card with kicker that in the earlier game anyway, can be a 4 mana 4/4, and then in the late game, you can make it a 7/7 if that's what you need. And it's great that he can play 2 different roles, either as like a 4-drop who really makes your board a little scarier, or an end of the game win condition as a 7/7. I think the best green common though is Llanowar Elves. I mean, it's back. It's always good when we've seen it before. The mana dorks like Llanowar Elves do have the downside of basically if you draw them late, they're not going to do much. But hey, at least they can block, so that's better than a land. But if you draw them early, they can give you incredibly explosive starts, like allowing you to play a turn 2 Sapherd or a turn 3 Gorger, just to look at the cards that are right in front of me right now. I mean, and that is insane. Those are great starts. If you can like jam 4 or 5 Llanowar Elves into your deck, you will happily do it. So that does it for the 5 colors. Now let's look at the artifact uncommons and commons, because there are a lot of artifacts in this set, enough that I think talking about this is relevant. So let's look at the uncommons first. I think the 3rd best artifact uncommon is Juggernaut. It's nothing special, certainly. You don't even want to first pick it. You probably want it mid-pack, but it's perfectly solid. 4 mana 5/3 is decent stats. It has to attack every turn, so it's not going to last for long. But it also can't be blocked by walls, which is somewhat relevant. There are a couple walls in this set, plus the blue removal spell that turns something into a wall. And all artifacts in this set have a little bit of additional value because of historic payoffs and artifact payoffs, of which there are both. So Juggernaut, though, you don't really want to first pick. Next up, I have Joyra's Familiar, a 4-mana 2/2 with flying. Not great stats, but making all your historic spells cost 1 less to cast is a big deal. There are lots of artifacts, legendaries, and sagas in this format. And I like the things that are historic payoffs more than I like the things that are legendary or artifact payoffs, because obviously historic payoffs are broader. So you can pull off, I think first picking Joyra's Familiar is actually worth considering because you're going to have a decent number of historic spells almost no matter what you do in this format. And the number 1 artifact uncommon is Icy Manipulator. It's another reprint like Juggernaut and Sarah Angel, which we saw earlier, and it's always been strong and limited just like Sarah Angel, and it will be here too. Tapping down your opponent's best attacker or blocker, depending on who's aggressive at the time, is excellent. And it has that additional bit of artifact upside. It is a very good first pick. I think first picking it over some of the best uncommons in other colors is worth considering because of the fact that you get to play it in your deck no matter what happens. Now let's look at the common artifacts. I think the third best common artifact is Aether Glider, another reprint though, not an exciting one. 3-mana 2/1 with flying that can't block. It's just a decent attacker in the air. There are aura and equipment in this format that you can put on it, then that's pretty nice. But it's nothing special. You certainly don't first pick it. It's actually sort of just filler, but I had to have 3 commons to talk about, and that's the one I chose to be number 3. Number 2, I think, is Blood Tallow Candle. I think people, well, maybe some people are overrating it, but I think a lot of people will underrate what this thing can do. It's a 1-mana artifact, which is nice for all the artifact trigger payoff things on historic cards and things like that, but it can also function as a removal spell. And if you didn't notice earlier in this video, not all the colors have a lot of removal. Red and black have a ton, and the other 3 colors have some, and really, like blue and green don't have any good removal to speak of, really. Whereas, Blood Tallow Candle certainly isn't good either, but it can provide you additional removal in a deck that normally can't run it. Not only that, there are ways, even at common and uncommon, to return artifacts from your graveyard, and if you can do that with this candle, you're going to get some serious value. I think the best common artifact, though, is Skittering Surveyor. It's, always good to have these sort of little creatures who can fix for you, and that's what it does. Searches up a basic land for you and puts it in your hand, and it doesn't hurt that it has 2 toughness, which means it can block the creature tokens in this format in most cases. That said, I don't think I would first pick any of these 3. They're all good-ish. I mean, Aether Glider, good's a strong word. Skittering Surveyor and Blood Tallow Candle are both things I would feel fine about having in my deck. Skittering Surveyor, I would feel, especially if I'm splashing, I'd feel really good about having in my deck. So that does it for all the best commons and uncommons in the set. I only have 1 video left talking about this format before it comes out, and that is my video on the biggest bombs in the format. On Friday, I'll be posting my first draft video of the format, though, because that's when it goes up on Magic Online. If this video was useful to you or you enjoyed it, don't forget to like it and share it so others can enjoy it too. And don't forget to subscribe for all of my future Dominaria limited content.